Oh, hi. You caught me in a little bit of shopping. I know I gotta get home to start the next video, but there's just a couple of things I need to grab, so just bear with me for a second. Small. God, they're all so small. Is there anything bigger than this? I need a big one. One big one. I don't need multi-packs. Just need one good one. One good sized. Whoa, look at that. Perfect. And done. Nuwambahome. What the hell is Nuwambahome? I mean, I didn't know. I was 14 years old. But I did know that somehow my beloved Iron Maiden were connected with Nuwambahome. So this bared some investigation, because obviously I was missing the boat on something here. I'd go into the record stores downtown, and I'd sheepishly ask, what is Nuwambahome? And combined with my own research in some of the European press magazines, stuff like the New Music Express, Melody Maker, Sounds, I found out that Nuwambahome was actually an acronym for the new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, the term Nuwambahome, the new wave of British heavy metal, was actually coined by Alan Lewis. He was the editor-in-chief of Sounds magazine. Jeff Barton, a couple of his other writers, were covering these live shows and doing record reviews of these new bands. And the term stuck. He titled one of the big articles, "The New Wave of British Heavy Metal," with a question mark, I believe it was. And the rest of the press just jumped on board with it. Now, I mean, heavy metal was really nothing new at the time. There was a lot of it going on already. You had stuff like Deep Purple, which morphed into Rainbow. Ritchie Blackmore was a big vanguard on that whole late 70s sound. Black Sabbath were just finishing up with Ozzy, and they'd picked up Dio, oddly enough, from Rainbow. There's such a crossfire of different people involved with each other back then. And the UFO. They had grabbed Michael Schenker from the Scorpions. I think he was like 16 years old at the time. He was just lighting the stages on fire around the world. And they're just putting on amazing shows, new lighting rigs, new pyrotechnics. The entire 9 yards were being explored by these guys. And obviously in the crowd were these younger people that wanted to get in on the action. And that's where my Iron Maiden came in. But then you had, from Sheffield, England, you had Def Leppard, another big Nuwambahome band. You had Saxon. They were fantastic, and they still are. One of the few bands that are still going. I mean, Leppard have since moved on to the pop realm. They're very Vegas now. Iron Maiden are really holding it down, though. They're really still putting on a great show. I think they're currently doing a tour for Somewhere in Time, which is something I really want to check out. It's one of my favorite albums of theirs. But there was also a lot of other bands involved that were kind of making a mark for themselves at the time anyway. Bands like Motorhead, Judas Priest, they had a foothold in the music scene. And I remember hearing this band, Judas Priest, on the radio a few times. They had a song, Living After Midnight, and it was kind of cool. So I had to pick up that album, and that album is British Steel, a classic. I mean, it's a little poppier than to be expected. They came off Killing Machine, or as it's known in North America as Hellbent for Leather. Columbia USA apparently had a problem with the title Killing Machine because it had murderous implications. So the title was changed. But Judas Priest really brought in that whole leather and studs thing. Of course, Rob, being who he is, he kind of begged and borrowed some of his outfits over the years, but the leather and studs thing from the S&M scene, things that he was interested in, suddenly became de rigueur for the style of heavy metal. So these young bands were starting to burn it up, and like I said, Motorhead, Judas Priest, they were kind of thrown into the mix as well, and the movement really caught my eye. I mean, I was just blown away by it. I had to pick up everything I could. So I was picking up the Def Leppards, I was picking up the Motorheads, I was picking up the Saxons. It's all great stuff, it's just super powerful, super fun. Of course, at the time, there was things connected with the Nuwambahome, bands like AC/DC, and I got into them pretty early in life, actually, because a friend of mine's older sister was dating a guy that lived next door to them. He had this big, cool, brown Plymouth Duster with slicks on the back. And he used to take us for a ride every once in a while. The nerdy kids always wanted to get in on the action. And he'd always play Power Age by AC/DC. Power Age led into Highway to Hell. And of course, in 1980, the monster of all of their albums, much to the sadness of the fact that the reason they got so lucky was the death of Bon Scott. It's too bad that Bon never had a chance to see the big stadiums the way AC/DC moved in. But with that came a lot of side projects, side things, smaller bands, stuff like Max Webster. I loved them. I mean, I saw them in my high school when I was a kid. It was like 1980. They're on the Universal Juveniles part of their career. It was kind of the end of their career. Terry Wilkinson, one of the main songwriters of the band, had left the band at that point, and Kim was desperately trying to keep the name going. The Universal Juveniles album is pretty much Kim's first solo record, but produced by Jack Richardson, actually, who was a teacher of mine. I went to sound engineering school for a year, and Jack was one of the production teachers there, so I kind of got a little insight on the whole process of how he dealt with that. The Tigers of Pantang, all sorts of other bands, Magnum, Angel Witch, all sorts of stuff out there that I was just blowing a lot of money on because it was all fantastic. It was all new. It was all stuff that no one in school really knew about. It was, again, almost like a little secret club. It was like the punk thing in a way. There was a lot of word of mouth, a lot of do-it-yourself in many cases. I mean, Iron Maiden's first release was the Soundhouse tapes. It was a 45, a 7-inch that they'd put together themselves to try and promote themselves. That thing is now worth a ton of money. But it was all do-it-yourself in many, many ways. Then, of course, the record labels jumped on board and started grabbing everything left, right, and center. And metal was suddenly on the rise again. The radio stations were covering some of this because they noticed what a huge movement it was. You also had a TV show, one in Canada in particular, that was a huge influence, was The New Music. And J.D. Roberts, he was one of the early hosts of that show. They would cover all sorts of stuff, local festivals like the Police Picnic. They would have the Police, obviously, like the Pretenders, the Clash would play these things. So here in Canada, we were kind of getting some early footage, these live shows that the New Music were covering. And it was just awe-inspiring to see this stuff. But nonetheless, I was still trying to pick up everything I could. And Chum FM, who were affiliated with City TV really was the home of the New Music. They had Motorhead in the charts. I mean, I couldn't believe it. One afternoon, I was listening to the radio, and Motorhead were due to be playing a show in Toronto. And I actually managed to win tickets. So here, Chum FM today is just mindless pop radio. It's nothing at all. But back then, they really did. They did really back the entire movement because hey, there was money to be made. That show, this one.
That's a bit better. So this is Canada, huh?
Was attended by me. I was in that crowd there somewhere, like, holy crap. An unbelievable show. Lemmy had some problems with his arm. He kept having to go off stage to try and loosen up a cramp that he had. Fast Eddie Clark, the guitar player, he was telling jokes, trying to keep the crowd calm. At one point, Lemmy just came out and said, okay, here's our last song, Bomber. And they did Bomber. Motorhead had a lighting rig in the shape of a bomber aircraft. Now, this thing would kind of ascend and descend as the set went. I mean, it had the spinning propellers, everything. Now, by the end of the song, the air raid sirens came on, their sound effect. There's also sound effect of bombers diving, Stukas, that type of thing. The stage went dark with the exception of the bomber rig that was just precariously going up and down. And people in the crowd were not happy with the short set. They only played about 45 minutes, something like that. And started throwing chairs at the stage. Combined with the noise, the visuals, I was smitten. I was like, that's it. This is, honest to God, the most important thing musically in my life right now. But something was on the horizon. something a little more extreme. Something we'll touch on a little later, perhaps in part 3, if there is a part 3, if I make it that far. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments. So make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.